Good morning, everyone. My name is Rueben Littlejohn, and I would like to begin by dedicating uh, this talk on walking meditation to uh, the 4 soldiers that lost their life in a terrorist attack in Chattanooga, Tennessee, as well as those who were injured. Um, I think that made me reflect very much on what I was to present today, which was the idea of walking, and these individuals were just standing, walking around when someone chose to take their life. So there's something to be said about having full appreciation for life in every moment, which is something that we practice here. The title of today's presentation is Walking Meditation, Analysis of Compound Movements. I chose that title because I began thinking about how standing could complement sitting and how walking can complement standing. And I ended up weeks later with the reverse and saying, well, maybe we're meditating all the time and therefore our walking complements our life, our standing complements our walking, our sitting complements kind of the reverse order of things. And I think there's something to be said for that. I'd like to begin with a paragraph that I read in doing some research on the topic that was entitled, the article was entitled, Why the Buddha Touched the Earth. It was by John Stanley, director of Ecological Buddhism, and David Roy, a Zen teacher. And they wrote, in one of Buddhism's iconic images, Gautama Buddha sits in meditation with his left palm upright on his lap, while his right hand touches the earth. Demonic forces have tried to unseat him because their king Mara claims that place under the Bodhi tree. As they proclaim their leader's power, Mara demands that Gautama produce a witness to confirm his spiritual awakening. The Buddha simply touches the earth with his right hand, and the earth immediately responds, I am your witness. Mara and his minions vanish. The morning star appears in the sky. This moment of supreme enlightenment is the central experience from which the whole of the Buddhist tradition unfolds. I ended up there because when we walk, aren't we also touching the earth? And when we bow and do a full bow in Buddhism, we extend our arms with our elbows touching the ground and we raise the Buddha. And there was an analogy there for me in the sense that is the earth these hands that are raising me? And with that being said, I'm wondering if I've really taken the time I should to appreciate the ability to stand and to walk and to do a full bow. Not necessarily in the sense of those who might be disabled or unable to perform those feats, but more so that I am more conscious now of how I connect with the earth and how the earth is one with me and I'm one with the earth. There's a quote from Black Elk, a Sioux medicine man, a Native American, that says, give me the strength to walk the soft earth, a relative to all that is. In making that connection with the earth, I'm forced to think about reflecting and taking a deeper and a more mindful look at how I step, what I see, what I hear, what I feel, what I touch, what I think, what I smell. And trying to put all those things in perspective, because after my 2 or 3 or 4 months of analysis on walking meditation, I started really finding that much of what walking is all about is not exclusive at all to Buddhism. I knew how to walk before I knew about the Buddha. And I was breathing before I knew about Buddhism. I was looking where I was stepping to make sure I was careful. I was listening for cars that might be coming down the street so I wouldn't be hit. I certainly wanted to be in areas where I could smell fresh roses or good things, or walk away from bad smells. So wasn't I already doing this? And what separates what we do as a walking meditation through Kinhin in Japanese Zen, what separates that practice from just the walking that we do and that we've done all of our lives? And I think it is the thing that separates what we're doing from just walking is the Buddhist experience, the Buddhist perspective, the precepts, how we analyze things from a Buddhist frame of mind. So that brought about my next bit of study in this walking meditation, and that was the study of impermanence. And how impermanence relates to walking wasn't clear to me originally, but I thought I better go to a Buddhist study or a law in order to try to relate that to walking. And I ended up saying that if I'm sitting here in a sesshin or during a session, that session or that sit must come to an end. There's a cycle of life associated with that. And when I stand, that's the end of that cycle. And so, therefore, I'm reborn in a standing position, which gave me a lot more appreciation for just standing there without doing anything. And from that stand, I'm reborn into a walking movement. And within each step, there's a birth and a rebirth, because every step comes to an extreme or an end, and a new step then begins. In my practice through the martial arts, I've studied many Buddhist and Taoist trainings as it relates to the human body. And one thing that's very popular, specifically in the Taoist tradition, is to analyze walking in a much deeper sense. And so I'm hoping what you take away from here, and my objective is that this will deepen your practice in some way. But they say that the ball of the foot, the area of the front of the foot, is considered to be yin energy, softness, feminine energy, a lightness or a lighter quality. And the heel of the foot is a yang energy, a darker, a more masculine, a heavier emphasis. And so as you see, when we're walking, one foot typically is a yang foot because I have the heel down as I'm stepping, and the other foot is releasing. It's becoming light, and it's emptying itself of its weight, and the weight is being absorbed by the stepping foot. So in that way, the Taoists analyze walking through yin and yang, through a cycle of birth and death, or what they would say extremes, extreme yin meaning nothingness, all the way to extreme yang, and nothing existing in those two states forever. I also looked at the practice of Kinhin that we're doing here as a way to reflect. I often find myself, depending on how the sit goes, if I'm on a bench, if I'm on a cushion, if I'm on a chair, how flexible I am that day, what the weather is like, how am I feeling on that day, as being a way to reflect. As I stand up and I begin and we bow and I return and prepare to walk, I often find myself not necessarily analyzing things from a true Buddhist perspective, I guess, maybe even truer than I think, but I start saying to myself, can I feel my leg? Can I feel my foot? How's my back feel? And then when I get going, those thoughts evolve too. And they evolve more to things about, in some cases, my journey of life, you know, whether it's on this particular day or throughout my week at work or the last month or a lifetime. But I'm often asking myself, where have I been? Where am I now? And where am I going? And I think the beauty of the practice of kinhin is that we're going nowhere, meaning we don't have a destination necessarily in mind. Ultimately, we'll end up back at our cushion, but I don't think that's the intent, is to take a certain number of trips around to end right where we are. We just are returning to our seat. So that takes me to the next point of the discussion, which I call engagement. I ended up on this because I was taking in my research to the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks a lot about walking meditation, and in particular engaged Buddhism. So I took that word engaged and thought about engagement to embodiment, meaning, is it possible for one to engage one's mind in thought and taking note as I'm sitting, as I'm standing, as I'm moving, to analyze from the six senses of Buddhism how I feel, how things smell, what things look like, what thoughts I might have, what I might hear and see. And then from there, begin to embody or remember things automatically so that I might be able to move on to other things to take note. Because one would think, if I'm able to take a step in a certain way that I want to take a step, and then follow that step in another way, that maybe I've to some degree mastered the feet. Now can I move to the ankles and see what are my ankles doing? And then once I've embodied the ankles, can I analyze my knees a little bit and see, should I have my knees a little bent? Am I locking my knees out when I do this? Does it feel better than in other ways? My hips, my shoulders, my elbows and wrists, my neck, my head, and making sure that my posture is in alignment. Taking these mental notes, I think, are important, and it dates all the way back to ancient times. There's a quote I ran into that they said was by the Buddha. I'm going to read it. You believe what you would like, but it says, "Whatever you see must be noted or mindful of as it is. Whatever you hear must be mindful of or noted. Whatever you smell must be observed. Whatever you taste, you must be aware of. Whatever you touch must be noted. Whatever you think about must be watched as it is." And so, if we are looking at things from a mindful perspective, since this is a word we hear a lot, mindfulness, are we really talking more about just taking a little mental note about how we feel from these six senses? And that's where I am right now in my research. I had a conversation with Roshi about this in preparation for today a week or two ago, and I was telling him this talk has evolved into a three-parter already, because you start analyzing things and then more things continue to unfold. And so I'm very, very happy about that. And I'd like to, after I read the next quote, engage you in an exercise when we walk around the room, and I will provide you a manner in which I'm working on stepping right now. It's not something that is the right way to step. It's not something that I read from a book. It's something that I've been studying where I am, and I'd like to share that with you, and hopefully in some way that might deepen your practice. As I did more research, I looked into how other types of Buddhism or Buddhists practice walking meditation. I talked with Roshi and asked him if there was any chanting that went on in the kinhin that we practice, and in the lineage in which he studied, there is not. But in other lineages, and some in China, they do chant certain sutras as they walk. So there are different ways of doing this, not necessarily right, not necessarily wrong. I think it's somewhat individual to your practice. And I also think that if you're doing this practice on your own at home, there are benefits to the exploring different ways of doing it. For example, if I am at home and I'm just doing a walking meditation, because I've not had the experience of sitting or the need to be reborn, I might turn around and walk the opposite direction to be reborn within that exercise. If I'm sitting at home, then I would also do my kinhin at home. And maybe not everybody does that. Maybe some people just only do the sitting and they reserve the kinhin for here. Or maybe they say, well, I'll walk to the coffee pot, you know. Right? But I think if you're taking that approach, you might kind of be missing a little bit of what's there to be offered within this practice. And so while I don't necessarily know that you have to walk as long as you sit, I believe that there's something to be said for when you standing for a significant period of time, to where you align yourself, you're breathing from your lower abdomen, you're relaxed, you're in a meditative state of mind, then turning and then beginning walking slowly and getting to that point in that state within the slow walk, and then transitioning from that into a fast walk and try as hard as you can to try to arrive at that state within the fast walk, which becomes even more challenging. Also, my reading of Thich Nhat Hanh, he talked about trying to arrive at this state, or this, releasing yourself into this meditative state on your own about every 15 minutes, if you can. Thinking about trying to make it a habit, because you don't necessarily know when you fall out of it. It's easier to fall out of it, I guess, than it is for some people to fall into it. So I will end with something I heard from Osho. I was listening to him, I think, on a YouTube clip, and I thought this was kind of interesting. Roshi was talking about having family over and having a young child there, and a lot of times children have a lot of energy, and having worked for a school district for a considerable amount of time, and those of us in the room who have realized they can have a tremendous amount of energy. And the example that Osho, the mystic, used was how a parent had brought their child to him because the child was probably hyperactive at that time, not sure how much ADHD analysis had gone on or what kinds of medications they had out there for kids at that time. But what he prescribed was have the kid run 7 times around the block. And then he'll be calmed down. So I guess the parent did that, and it worked. And so I'm wondering if sometimes when we're struggling to get into our meditation, if maybe we shouldn't begin with the kinhin until we feel a little more settled and our energy drops maybe into our legs and our lower part of our body, and maybe we become a little more tired, then we might be able to center ourselves a little bit better. Just some thoughts. So with that being said, if I could have everybody stand and put your cushion in, I'd like to take us around the room. You're welcome to try this if you'd like. If not, you can do it at your own pace, and we'll begin with the slow walk. If you could face in a clockwise circle or square, you can put your hands, as we do, with your right hand over embracing your left fist. Suzuki Roshi talked about acting as though you had a pillar in your hand. And then from here, your feet, he said, your big toe is about the width of your nipple line of your chest there. And so you should have almost a fist width between your heels. Your knees are not locked out, they're slightly bent. Your posture is straight, similar to how we would sit in Zazen, and then we move to a moving form of Zazen by taking a step, and we'll begin with our left foot. Go ahead and step out with your left foot on your shoulder line. From there, when you step at the shoulder line, you're going to begin to transfer your weight onto the heel of that foot. Okay. The rear foot is going to have its weight on the ball of the foot. From there, as you begin to transfer your weight, you're going to want to align yourself, your body, your head, your neck, your hip, your knee, over your left foot as you take a step with your right foot, and then transfer your weight. From here, as you transfer your weight onto the next side, you're going to align your hip, your neck, and your head, and your knee over that foot, and then take the following step. And then you walk on your own. One idea is to, as you transition through the step, to bring your knees close together and then step out. That kind of can help you maintain your balance. Sometimes people with less balance might struggle more with a slow walk than the fast walk. As you're stepping now, you might think about the earth supporting you or holding you up. You might even read about how some people synchronize their breath and their step, inhaling and exhaling. I don't necessarily know that that's where we want to go. At least as you begin focusing on this, I will leave that to the individual. Some people might even recite a positive trait as they take a step, and they might alternate that. Maybe peaceful with one step and happy with the other step. From here, we're going to begin to walk a little faster without bowing. Go ahead and just walk at a normal pace. And in our class, we're allowed to allow our arms to drop, so you're welcome to do that. If you're practicing this at home, one word of caution is have enough room to make a nice sized circle. If you start with a tight circle, like the size of your zabuton, you might get dizzy if you're walking at a fast pace. And when you return to your cushion, remain there. And take a seat. I will close today with a martial arts demonstration. This martial arts demonstration that I'm going to perform comes from one of the styles that I have practiced for a number of years and teach. It is called the 8 trigrams palm. It's a Chinese style of Kung Fu. The 8 trigrams actually represent diagrams around the yin-yang symbol, and you may have seen the trigram around the yin-yang symbol, and it sometimes makes the shape of an octagon or sometimes a circle. But from that practice has evolved a circular martial art that was born out of the Taoist practice of circle walking, which occurs a lot of times around a building, within a building, around a tree, outside or inside. And from that, martial art movements were combined along with the proper breathing. And the thought was that it would be a good art to fight multiple opponents, because you become comfortable moving as you're striking. As well, you also are able to adapt and change direction freely. So I will demonstrate that. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Any questions?
What was that called?
That's called Bagua 8 trigram palm.
And what tradition is that in?
Chinese Kung Fu tradition.
How do you relate that to Tai Chi?
So I demonstrated Tai Chi Chuan second. Tai Chi is a cousin to Bagua. They're in the same family. They use softness, but Bagua is more known to use quicker explosive energy. On the carpet, I wasn't sure how to go with that, but Tai Chi is pretty much done slow. There are some movements that can be done with power, but overall, as you know, it's done more slowly. But the softness, the water element, the flowing is common in both styles. Tai Chi, like Bagua, uses the opponent's energy against them, But in Bagua you're not always necessarily the center of the circle. You might make the opponent the center of the circle. Talking to John, who's got some background in martial arts. You may make the opponent the center of the circle and move around that, similar to maybe some of the Aiki styles, where the person would be the center pretty much in Tai Chi. You're going to take this person and repel them or use their energy to emit force against them. Yeah, but both good health exercise. In China, you see them practiced in the park, sometimes together, sometimes individually, but they can also be used for self-defense. They have self-defense rules. I guess, yes. Any other questions?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you're probably familiar. There's that saying, fighting is nothing other than walking.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you use?
Fighting is nothing other than walking. What does that mean? Well, you have to know the details to really understand what it means.
Yeah, it's this whole idea, I guess, around no matter what I'm doing, if a punch is coming in and I'm blocking, almost like I'm just walking, I can just go on this way. Block. I just turn and step this way into your center. I can just do normal human movements. It's not necessarily something, in other words, I think some of the mixed martial arts athletes that you see today are relying heavily on their athleticism and their prowess and muscularity, their size, but that's not necessarily what the true martial arts is about. If you understand the body mechanics, you can look like me and still be pretty good at it, I guess.
As you get older.
I watched once physical encounter between American boxer and martial art kung fu. This was made in China. It was hilarious for me because so he didn't know what to do. He started dancing him, and in the middle of that, he gave him just boom, and he was like flying. What is this about?
So you have to practice different elements. What I demonstrated was a form which contains the technique. So I would take one technique out of there and I would drill that with power with my students so that they could hit hard with that or defend hard with that at fighting speed with that movement. But the form is kind of a spiritual practice, but it's also an exercise, and it's also a balance and a coordination feat to try to pull it off.
So how long have you been doing wushu? Who were your teachers and all that kind of stuff?
I was 10 years old when I started this thing. 10 years old, 43 now, 33 years, I guess. And my main teacher is a lady named Susie Fong. She's a teacher out of China, but she lives, her home base is Santa Monica, California. Yeah, she's the main one that I learned under some other people, but she's the one that I pretty much embrace her teaching, and that's what I teach.
Okay, and where would your class be?
I just teach a few guys behind the Carlsbad Library on Saturday morning. Just very small. I mean, I don't mind anybody coming in, but I'm not so sure how I feel about.
You don't have a big dojo or anything?
Yeah, the McDonald's approach. I'm just not sure I'm totally sold on that approach.
No, you're never gonna make it.
Now, one thing I noticed was that it seemed like your focus on the Kinhin really ended up aligning with your process through developing your thoughts about it. Because you were kind of going step by step, you were, first I started with this.
Right.
And then that led to this, So I just thought that was interesting, that like maybe, and then I, doing the participating and listening to that kind of guidance about alignment, I felt like I had a lot more clarity. I mean, I felt a lot more clear, it helped me focus more precisely, on this. And anyway, thank you. That was really
I
nice.
appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, it's interesting when you're doing these practices where you can take them. It's pretty fun.
Maybe you can make an observation on something I've observed. Probably the easiest to demonstrate. Because I didn't really, when I was doing the exercise, I wasn't really watching what you were doing. So, but I've noticed some people, what I kind of called it the over Tai Chi walk, and I know some people will, and I'm sure it's a way of, and in fact I've done it myself. It's a way of feeling the earth, feeling what's going on at each moment and so forth. But I noticed some people will keep going.
Yeah, the crane step.
Yeah, and then they'll bobble a little bit and so forth. But then if I've watched and I've seen some film of Zen people walking, it's often not so much a slow step, but
They run.
it's pretty well.
Is that
In
Monty
Zen
Python?
they run. I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, well, that's it. But it's kind of
Half
a
step.
fast thing. Yeah, half step.
It's a half step.
And it's not. There's not much time spent, in midair from one to the other. I just wonder what
This would
you.
be a good place for it. Isn't it called the Ministry of Funny Walk?
Yeah. So I'm studying the half step about a month or two ago, and what I found using the yin yang idea that was comfortable for me was when I was doing it. As I was stepping up, I made sure that the ball of this foot passed the heel of this foot. I mean, I'm getting real technical here, guys. But then I would step here, and then I would step here, and as I was bringing my other foot up, I would just bring it, just the ball past the heel. I was just playing with it, make it your own. Our teacher allows for that, which is kind of nice. Maybe in other places you won't get the same leniency.
Well, and as I was pointing out, I mean, different teachers and different traditions, different lineages, they have all kinds of different ways. Yeah, Renzai might be running around the room, yelling moo as you run around the room. So the variations are across the board. And as you noted, I like for people to experiment. I like what you said. I don't think I've ever said this before. I have talked about people walking in meditation at home, but to actually combine it with your sitting, take a couple minutes before you actually sit down to do a walk around the room or whatever. That's a great idea.
Well, it makes sense because I know if I've had what I call a bad sit, and I'll go walk, and then I'll sit back down. It's like I'm in a whole completely different place. So there's no reason why not do the walking first before you start, especially if you're at home.
It'd be interesting sometime in the future to come back into either you or someone else here to do a talk about bowing as well, as a whole world too unto itself.
Absolutely. I was reading up on that. One of the books you recommended with a lot of stuff on that.
If I may say only one thing, I mean, I thought when you walk, you walk. Right? When you're hungry, eat, and when you are, as Vinci said, when I'm hungry, I eat my rice. When I'm tired, I close my eyes. I food think that I am idiot, but whatever wise knows that I'm right, something like that. So to over-introduce the brain or the intellect to that, I think is a little bit.
Well, I think it's there's something to what he said, and often with the kind of trained stuff, I mean, he will kind of know that. Yeah, you're in a fight, you step in and punch somebody, right? But stepping in and punch somebody is a lot of technical detail and stuff like that, and you're training your mind so that it does that automatically, and then it's really simple. But to get to that point where it's simple, it's not it's not what you're doing every day necessarily, and maybe you're in the Zen center, and whether you walk with perfect body mechanics or not, maybe it doesn't really matter. But
No, it does not overanalyze.
But this to me is part of the spectrum. And when I say experiment, I really want people to experiment with the very much paying attention to every single thing you're doing, thinking about it, and then go all the way to the extreme that Yal's talking about. Let it all go and just walk. To me, and I think it's what you're pointing out too, is having that full gamut of understanding. And so to get to the point where you can just walk, sometimes it's helpful to have played the scales, to flip the metaphor.
I think he just went back to what you said. I think he just went back to what you said about martial arts being walking, that one and the same. I think the whole idea is ultimately it is just walking. It's nothing more than that. But you know, as you're doing something, at least as I'm doing something over extended periods of time, I can't help but to look in it for efficiencies and ways to do it differently or better.
But then there was, yeah, like I was like kind of there's that reciprocal effect where you're walking kind of seems to, that attention to the walking, there's like your mind starts to walk. Like there's like the way you're walking is instructing you're thinking about your walking. So
Yeah.
there seemed to be a kind of circular activity there, you know.
Yeah.
We spent a lifetime practicing just to be here.
That's true, isn't it? No, great point.
Thank you. Very nice. Shall we do our 3 bows and go have chocolate cake? Somebody had a birthday.
Somebody.